Welcome to the White Spring Bunker. These halls were built to safeguard some of the most prestigious members of the United States government. Now we are all that remains, though we are always looking for men and women capable of helping us restore what has been lost. In return, we offer this, our refuge from the world above. Please, take your time and look around. We've made great efforts to restore this place to its former glory. Welcome, member, to our Little Enclave.
Welcome back, members. As always, I am the Operative, your designated tour guide and host here at the White Spring. Even as Major Lilith makes her way north to her parents' old home in Berkeley Springs, Colonel Valeria is approaching a different kind of homecoming of her own. Former Vault 76ers have reclaimed the old Morgantown Airport from the Scorched and have begun to build a thriving community. However, Appalachia is far more dangerous than any of them could imagine. But perhaps the Colonel can provide a solution. At a price, of course. Join us as our little enclave steps into the light. Far above Appalachia, a relic of old-world technology continues to spy on the world below. The Kovac Muldoon drifts silently in geosynchronous orbit, its high-tech cameras and sensors trained on the region, and guided by instructions from Modus. Modus was delighted when then-Captain Valeria re-established communications with the satellite. He felt, if he had feelings at all, liberated. Although what he learned from the data he received was troubling. The Scorched had overrun the entire region, wiping out everyone. And that was unfortunate. And his continued isolation from the rest of the Enclave was inconvenient. Although he knew the connection had been severed, he had no data as to the cause, or exactly when it occurred, only that it happened sometime during or immediately after the Great War. However, to quote an old idiom in his memory banks, when the world provides lemons, ask your protectron to make lemonade. If he could not contact the others, then he would focus his efforts on Appalachia, for the time being. As he watched the former residents of Vault 76 spread across the region, he found their efforts to come back to Scorched and begin the process of rebuilding to be satisfactory. However, without central direction, those efforts might interfere with his plans. To mitigate this, it would be helpful if his new human agents could take a more direct approach in establishing relationships and ultimately gain control of these new settlements. In the name of the Enclave, of course. And through the months of watching and collecting data, one settlement in particular drew his attention.
Ah, a new download from the Kovac. We find it most satisfactory to be able to see again. The residents of Vault 76 have been busy. It was fortunate that Colonel Valeria found us. So much potential to achieve our goals. A large explosion was noted in the vicinity of Berkeley Springs. We calculate that subject FV9030.001 successfully located her father's laboratory. Her desire to learn more about her past and gain access to the research is proceeding according to the plan. However, we also calculate an 85.3% chance that subject FV9030.001 will withhold certain pertinent information, but this is well within acceptable parameters. Steps will be taken to account for any missing data upon the subject's return. Our Morgantown project continues to progress according to our schedule. As we have expected, the former Vault 76 residents have established themselves at the airport, busy as beavers, it appears. Expansion of the existing facilities has accelerated, and we have positively identified the leadership of the settlement to be former Vault 76 security officers. This is as we expected. However, we have yet to discover the whereabouts of the overseer. This is unfortunate. The Colonel's team should make contact with the settlement shortly. Per our plan, We will await the Colonel's message to activate our demonstration. Control of the Morgantown settlement will be our first step, but certainly not the last.
Captain Edwards took his normal stroll across the old Morgantown Airport runway. Since they had first arrived and cleared out the area, he made it his habit to walk around the compound, both to keep up with everyone and also to continue to show that he was in charge.
Well, I knew all about the exit protocols at Vault 76. Once everyone was out, the door would seal behind us. Vault-Tec said it was to encourage the residents to go out and rebuild instead of relying on the safety of the vault. Of course, Vault-Tec never anticipated the Scorched, and, well, that changed everything. As a former head of Vault Security, I'd taken charge of as many residents as I could find. Followed the overseer's trail as far as Flatwoods, and with that place being deserted, I made the call to head north, to Morgantown. It was a damn good thing I did. We were running out of supplies when one of my old security team, Wilm Kennedy, came back and said there was some kind of abandoned settlement at the airport. Didn't really have much of a choice, so we got everybody moving, and sure enough, we struck gold. Those responders, God rest their souls. Well, they left us with just about everything we needed. Of course, we still had to clear out the Scorched, and we lost some good people that day. But we found plenty of food, supplies, and even training holotapes to help the folks learn how to survive. And better yet, we had workbenches, medical facilities, and even a way for us to signal the old automated government aid drops, too. Of those, that last one proved to be a bit of a problem. The flares and even the drone itself, well, they tended to attract unwanted attention. Most of those former vultures couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, at first, but they got the hang of it after the fourth or fifth attack. It's amazing what being in mortal danger will do. My guys, our old Vault Security team, keep the peace and keep the Scorched away. We've been real lucky. Only had a couple of the old folks pass on. And there was, Bobby. It's been okay, though, but it's still a struggle. People are making a good run of it. And we keep hearing about much worse things down south. We got real lucky having Janet McCallie with us. She's a former scientist from CIT and responsible for our small research and medical team. She's nice, but a very firm old woman. Her husband had passed away from a heart attack soon after leaving Vault 76, and she'd really thrown herself into her work once she got access to the facilities at the airport. Janet was the one who uncovered the old responder research on a vaccine for that Scorched plague. Without her, we might all have ended up like the responders before us. Melissa Tennyson, the daughter of a pair of Nobel Prize-winning researchers, had taken on the task of school teacher, principal, and superintendent all in one. She was born before the war, but grew up in the vault. Taking the bull by the horn, she'd organized a school for the children and could be found every day, either in class or working with the kids in the gardens. Good old Jason Barron was in charge of the limited production and repair facilities we had access to. Almost single-handedly, he cobbled together weapons, ammunition, tools, and a host of other items they needed to survive. A bookworm with photographic memory, he had managed to read and memorize just about every technical manual in Vault 76, and now he was putting that knowledge to good use. He'd also been the one who figured out how to call in the government supply drones, though it was me and my team that had to take care of things when all those Scorched showed up. Together, we represented the governing council for the Morgantown settlement. We weren't elected per se, although every couple of weeks we discussed it at the regular meeting, but instead we decided to hold off until things got a bit more stable. With a couple of 100 residents, decisions made by the council were widely discussed and agreed upon long before any vote was held. So far, it had worked rather well, and despite some hiccups, we're actually beginning to thrive. That didn't mean everything was peaches and cream. Reynolds and his crew, that nice Sally girl, up and disappeared right around the time Bobby Stoller got himself killed over at the high school. That was enough to put my foot down as far as people leaving the settlement. Hell, some of those other folks, people who've been north of here, and even a couple of adventured as far as the ash heap, well, they'd been telling stories of things called super mutants, mole miners, and even giant flying bats called scorch beasts. Gives me the chills just thinking about it. I mean, I've read the terminals here, I know what happened, but no way, no how am I letting any of our folks out until we know what we're dealing with.
Hey there, Captain. Nice day, isn't it?
Tom had been on the Vault 76 security team and was now Edward's second in command.
Sure is, Tom. How's it been going? Seen anything interesting out there?
Not much to write home about. Seen a few of those Scorched over by the train yard. Might be time to send some of the guys over there to clear them out again.
Yeah, they seem to filter back in every few days. May need to expand the barricades and get some people over there permanently. I don't want any of those things to get in here.
The two chatted for a few more minutes before Edwards continued his walk towards the end of the runway. He stopped in front of the old quarantine section. The responders had sectioned off the whole area while they tried to come to grips with the Scorched plague. Most of the residents avoided this section. Even though the plague was no longer a threat to them, it was because of the smell. Towards the end, the responders had been burning the bodies of those infected, in a vain attempt to contain it.
Ugh. Still smells like death, even after all these years. Glad we found those gas masks, 'cause my guys could barely stand it, waiting for those damn drones to show up. Every responder thought it was a good idea to put their quarantine right next to the drone landing site. Well, I guess they got what they deserved.
Turning around, Edwards walked back past the metal hangars and shipping containers which many residents had made home. He waved to the lookouts on top of the air traffic control tower and exchanged pleasantries with Miss Tennyson and her class, helping out in the community garden.
Oof. Watch where you're going, Cindy.
Oh, I'm sorry, Captain. I wasn't paying attention to where I was going.
That much is obvious. It was Cindy. Again. She was a great kid, but always had her head in the clouds. Ever since they arrived at Morgantown, Cindy wanted to explore and see the rest of Appalachia. I'd be forced to send members of my own team out to get her when she wandered a little too far out from the compound. Where are you headed to this time, Cindy?
Mr. Barron was looking for some more Protectron parts. I told him I would help find them.
You weren't planning on leaving the compound again, were you?
Well, maybe just a quick run to the auto body shop north of here. I thought I saw some parts there last week and I wanted to check.
Look, kid, I know you're just trying to help, but I can't have you just wandering around out there. You remember what happened to Bobby, don't you?
Bobby was stupid and a bully. I'm smarter and way more capable than he ever was.
She got angry whenever anyone tried to compare her to Bobby. He even had the gall to hit on her soon after they got to Morgantown. She wished she just could have punched him, just like that girl Valeria did back in the vault.
Cindy, just don't leave the compound. If Mr. Barron tells me he does need those parts, I'll let you go, but you'll be going with someone from my team. Do you understand?
Ugh. Fine.
Now why don't you go see what Ms. Mercer's doing? I heard she needed an extra set of hands at the water purifiers.
After making sure she was headed in the right direction, he continued to walk back down the runway. He needed to check in with his technical wizard anyway. He stopped in front of the old bot maintenance hangar.
Jason, you in there?
A grimy-faced man peeked over a table covered in Protectron parts.
Oh, hey, Captain. Out for your usual walkabout?
You know it, Jason. But I've been meaning to ask you about those bots. We have a couple up and running, but the folks keep asking about when we can get some more to help out around here.
Jason Barron stood up, putting his wrench on the table while pulling out a handkerchief and wiping down his sweaty brow.
You gotta tell those folks to have some patience. These bots are practically dinosaurs now. I'm not quite sure how the responders kept them up and running, and I'm robbing Peter to pay Paul just to keep the ones running that we've got. But I found some records here about a pretty well-maintained Protectron out there in downtown Morgantown. Looks like we might be able to get it to walk its way back here if I can get the right signal sent out.
Downtown, huh?
I know what you're thinking, but we don't actually need to go get it. There is a kind of remote setup. We can simply tell it to walk its way here.
All the way through God knows what?
It's some kind of law enforcement robot the responders built. Supposedly it's pretty tough and armed too, but maybe we could meet it halfway?
You know the deal, Jason. Put your plan together and deliver it to the committee at the next meeting and we'll all vote.
Okay. Anyway, I need to find the recall signal first for this to work at all.
Good. And when you get the chance, can you go talk to Ms. Mercer? She swears something's wrong with her purifier. Also, Cindy's trying to bug out again. Did you ask her about some Protectron parts by chance?
She tried to use that excuse again, huh? She's been nagging me for a week to let her go and check out this auto parts place. She claims it might have some extra parts for us. She stopped by here about 20 minutes ago, talking mile a minute about something. I wasn't really listening.
Thanks. That's what I thought. Looks like I'll be talking to her again in the morning.
After finishing his final errand for the morning, Edward started back towards the main terminal. It made a fine base of operations, a meeting and bunkhouse all in one. It had been a pain to clear and clean, but now it was the best roof they had over anyone's head.
Oh, crap, what now?
Hi, I'm Fire Rider, and I'm the host of The Pixel People, a podcast dedicated to taking a close look at our favorite characters from our favorite video games. From major characters who define the course of a game's storyline to smaller characters who you might have never noticed. Every week, we go beyond the quest line to examine a particular character's story arc and choices, and discover the real-world parallels and life lessons hidden just below the surface. I hope you'll join us. You can find the Pixel People on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and everywhere else you listen to podcasts.
Edwards ran to the southern barricade, ignoring a myriad of questions thrown in his direction by the residents. Corporal Kennedy was closer to the action with a pair of binoculars when he called her on the radio.
Kennedy, report.
Sir, there's some kind of firefight going on up there. I can't make anything out from here. There's lots of military-grade ordnance being thrown around.
He could see Kennedy pointing across the river. Edwards pressed the binoculars to his eyes and scanned to see where she was pointing. At first, he couldn't see anything. Then he saw the telltale flashes of weapons fire. Focusing in, he was able to make out several Scorched rushing toward the farm. Then they were cut down by whomever was in the farmhouse. It was maddeningly difficult to tell what was going on. Edward's first instinct was to send out some of his men to either help or get more information. But a few months in Appalachia had also taught him an abundance of caution.
Corporal, assemble the team and break out the weapons.
Are we heading out?
Absolutely not. Get everyone to their positions. Our first priority is to protect the settlement.
Edwards watched her run back down the stairs and into the terminal building. It was a testament to their continued drills that within minutes Edwards' team spilled out the front door and quickly moved to their assigned barricades. Each was wearing a variety of armor, mostly leather with some combat armor mixed in, armed with pistols and hunting rifles. When Kennedy returned, she handed Edwards his combat rifle, while she chambered her own. The firing had died down, but the rising smoke created a haze which made it hard to discern what was going on.
Kennedy, get the children into the basement. You stay there with them until you hear from me. You understand?
But Captain...
No buts, Kennedy. Just do it.
She nodded and made her way back into the settlement to round up the kids.
Hell, I hate sending her away, but I gotta put the kids first. Whoever's out there is throwing around some serious ordnance. Who knows if they're friendly? Plenty of responder logs talked about raiders. Too many former Vault 76 residents have gone rogue too. I don't need to worry about the kids getting caught in the crossfire.
The firing had died away completely, and from what he could see, the farm was now deserted except for the bodies of the dead Scorched. He scanned to the left and right, then finally caught a glimpse of a small group working their way towards the rail yard. From what he could see, they were organized and moved as a team. 2 would bound forward, and then the other 2 would be in overwatch, and then they would repeat. He heard someone coming up the metal stairs and turned to find Melissa Tennyson, wearing a too large combat helmet and carrying an old pool cue.
Just what in the Sam Hill is going on, James? Kennedy just shuffled all my kids off to the shelter and scared the bejesus out of us.
It's okay, Melissa. It's out of an abundance of caution.
Caution over what exactly?
Edwards looked back to see the mystery group charge into the Morgantown train yard, followed by the sharp report of automatic weapons fire.
Melissa, this really isn't the time for a conversation. Please, just get below with the children, and me and my team will deal with this.
Don't you dare patronize me. I'm more than capable of handling myself and protecting our children, and I'm not going to run and hide.
Okay, Melissa. You win. But please, just keep your head down if things get ugly.
Fine.
Then they both turned their attention to the train yard. The fighting ended almost as abruptly as it began. Edwards never found more than a dozen or so Scorched in his previous forays into the yard to clear it, so he wasn't surprised that whoever these people were made quick work of whatever was there. Of course, now he was plenty concerned. He was no spring chicken, and hadn't been even when he entered Vault 76. He'd been in the Army and fought in Alaska, and even a tour in China proper before he mustered out and was snapped up by Vault Tech to head security for them in 76. Seemed like a whole nother life to him, but he damn well recognized military tactics when he saw them.
Shit. My team does plenty of good against those damn Scorched, but against people? Lord in heaven, I hope they're friendly.
Just in case, he rechecked his magazine, ejecting it from the combat rifle and tapping it against the metal barricade, just to make sure the rounds were seated correctly. Melissa was watching the train yard intently. Edwards could tell she was nervous by the tapping of her foot and the fidgeting, trying to keep that damn combat helmet on her head. If the situation wasn't so dangerous, he would have found it funny. Emerging from the train yard, Edwards could see 4 individuals walking in a spread formation, rifles at the ready. From this distance, he couldn't make out specific details yet, but the armor looked familiar at least. It was the 4th individual that got his blood running cold. He'd seen power armor before. He'd even trained in the older T-45s and newer T-51Bs and fought beside those armored troops, but he'd never seen anything like what was coming towards them now. It was definitely some kind of power armor, but heavily modified and, quite frankly, terrifying. And it was carrying what looked like an enormous sledgehammer. Edwards' team had found an old suit of T-45 in the train yard, but it was missing several pieces, and more importantly, they didn't have any fusion cores to run it anyway. Now he wished they had tried harder to find some.
Tom!
Tom Gunther was just staring, too.
Tom!
Oh, sorry, Captain. What do we do?
Get the bunker buster.
Tom dropped down from his barricade and ran over to the storage shed. Bunker Buster was an old missile launcher they'd found on one of their expeditions into Morgantown, inside an old wrecked APC. Unfortunately, they only had 2 missiles, and Jason Barron wasn't entirely sure if the thing would even fire.
Crap. I don't know if showing on the missile launcher's a good or bad thing. Might cause bigger problems.
They were maybe 400 or 500 yards away now, angling for the main gate, just the right of his current position. Edwards could hear Tom huffing and puffing as he lugged the rocket launcher up to the barricade.
Tom, keep out of sight, just in case. I don't want to provoke these people if we don't have to.
Putting down the launcher and taking a quick breather, Tom gave him a thumbs up. About 200 yards away, Edwards saw the lead soldier put up her hand, and the rest of the team stopped. The one in power armor stepped up as the 2 of them continued forward, leaving the other 2 behind. It didn't look like they were expecting trouble. None of their weapons were raised. Now he could get a good look at what he assumed to be the leader. It was definitely a woman, wearing what looked to be some kind of combat armor, a camo face mask, and a military cap. She was cradling a modified combat rifle and scanning the barricades as she walked towards the main gate. They were within easy calling distance now, and Edwards felt a little foolish that he hadn't yelled at them sooner to stop, but he had been so fascinated by the scene.
Okay, that's far enough. Stop right where you are and identify yourselves.
Edwards' voice echoed, and the 2 stopped walking. The leader looked up at him, and they made a quick motion with her hand. The person in the power armor walked up behind her and leaned down. They must have had a brief conversation, because after a few seconds, the other one in the power armor nodded and backed up several steps.
I am Lieutenant Colonel Valeria from the Enclave. We've come here to introduce ourselves and talk to you.
Enclave? I'm sorry, but that name isn't familiar. We are a peaceful settlement. All former Vault 76 residents here, and we don't want any trouble.
We represent the remaining portions of the U.S. government. We were sent here because our goals are the same. We are going to rebuild Appalachia, and we'd like your help.
Government? Help? That was about the last thing I ever expected to hear.
I know this probably comes as a surprise. But if you just let us in to talk, it will all become clear.
You're not actually going to let them in, are you?
We wouldn't want to be impolite, Colonel. You can understand in these trying times that we need to be especially careful.
The one calling herself the Colonel nodded in agreement.
Your men will need to stay out here, Colonel. You can enter, but no weapons, if you wouldn't mind.
Turning around, the Colonel handed her rifle to the power armor user. She faced Edwards again and put up her hands.
Is there anything else?
Edwards could hear more steps coming in behind him. Looking back, the other members of the council had all gathered.
Well, that was fast.
Captain, what's going on?
We have guests. They've agreed to send in one person, unarmed. All they want to do is talk.
I don't know about this, Captain.
Edwards looked down at the one calling herself Colonel. Although the mask covered her face, he could tell that she was amused. She just folded her arms and waited. The captain came down from the barricade, followed by Melissa. The 4 council members gathered in a small circle. Edwards briefed them all in turn, ending with,
They've shown no hostile intent despite having superior firepower. I don't see the harm in talking. Maybe, just maybe, this is what we've been waiting for.
Okay, Captain. But we'll all talk to them together. Agreed?
Open the gate, Tom.
Tom jogged over to the gate control. It hadn't been working when they first arrived, but through a lot of hard work, they repaired the mechanism and got power restored. When he flipped the switch, the generator kicked on, belching smoke, and the gate screeched as it slowly rose. Slinging his rifle over his back, Edward walked to the now open gate. Their guest waited until the mechanism stopped before striding forward. He could now evaluate her up close. She was about 5'7" and was clad in some kind of advanced combat armor. Although it was scuffed from use, it was very well maintained. The mask she was wearing appeared to have night vision capabilities and probably protected against gas as well. It had been more than 2 decades since Edward had seen anything like it. There had been this operation in southern China where his fire team had supported a group of DIA operatives, and they had been equipped with similar gear. In his estimation, this wasn't some raider faction or scavenged equipment. This could be the real deal. She stopped a couple of feet from him and put out her hand. For some reason, he felt like he'd met this person before. Maybe it was her stance or bearing, but he couldn't place it. He put out his most sincere smile and took her hand. It certainly wasn't a womanly grip, but instead was strong and expressed confidence. What happened next, however, nearly floored him and everyone else around. The leader reached up and unstrapped the mask, taking it off and attaching it to a clip on her waist. When she raised her head and faced Edward, brushing the hair out of her eyes, it revealed the face of a fellow vault dweller, Valeria Faustina.
Valeria?
Valeria smiled. Her face still showed her youth, but she wasn't the same girl he knew in Vault 76. A set of wicked scars traced down the right side of her face, starting from her hairline to cheekbone, and an eye patch covered her right eye. But it was the intensity he saw and recognized from his days in the Army more than 2 decades before of a seasoned veteran.
Lieutenant Colonel Valeria Faustina, Field Commander of the Appalachian Enclave, at your service. Captain Edwards, I know this probably comes as quite the surprise, and I apologize for the theatrics, but we do have important matters to discuss.
Edward's puzzled look spoke for itself. The last he saw of Valeria was when she punched Bobby Stoller at the Reclamation Night party.
Where are your parents? What happened?
They died, Captain. As to what happened after, well, we have a lot to talk about. I told my team that we would probably need a few hours. As you requested, they'll wait outside until we're finished.
A small crowd had gathered around them. All of them recognized Valeria, and all had a million questions. Some started to ask, others even shouted.
Okay, people, there will be a time and a place for questions. Valeria and I can still call you that, right?
Of course.
Yes, Valeria and I will have a discussion with the council. If you have any specific questions, please let Cindy know. She'll be responsible for collecting and delivering them to me, personally.
Cindy looked startled and quite unprepared for the rush of people who turned and cornered her. As Edward started escorting Valeria to the airport terminal building, he chuckled as he saw Cindy frantically scribbling notes on a pad. She looked up briefly and locked eyes with his. If looks could kill, he would have dropped dead right there and then. Valeria followed Edwards closely, looking around the settlement, taking it all in. Frankly, she was impressed that they managed to secure the location, and even appeared to be thriving. Although this was one of the safer areas of the region, they probably had no idea of the horrors that awaited them if they traveled either further north, or worse yet, south. She remembered Edwards from the vault. She never had much interaction with him, though her parents felt that vault security performed adequately. But she did recall that Edwards did give her a wink after that incident with Bobby Stoller. As they approached the terminal, Edwards explained the short history of the settlement. He also told her about the other members of the council, and that they'd be anxious to hear about the happenings in the rest of the region, and if there really was a government out there which was ready to help.
Valeria, you'll have to understand that the folks here are going to be skeptical. You're still a kid. No offense.
None taken.
We've been on our own for a while now. We've also lost people. So just tell us straight, okay?
Captain, you have no idea the things you really need to be worried about. And honestly, I'm the last thing you should be afraid of right now.
Edwards walked her into the terminal. Certainly it had seen better days, but these new settlers were attempting to put back together something the responders had created nearly 20 years before, only to fall before the Scorched.
If you could wait here, I'll make sure the others are here and we can get started.
Valeria just nodded and walked over to the chair. She made sure to check in with her team on her Pip-Boy, because negotiations would prove difficult if Sergeant Muller busted into the compound in his power armor looking for her. She was sure he and the other operatives would keep clear, as ordered, and there were a couple of other locations in the Morgantown area she asked them to investigate, including the old Chinese spy bunker beneath Mama Dolce's. Walking into their impromptu conference room, Edwards watched the other members of the council come in through the back. He could tell that already none of them were especially happy with the situation.
What the hell do you think you're doing, Edwards? Why are we even meeting with that child?
That child arrived here with a heavily armed team, including a fully operational set of power armor.
Enclave? Colonel? Sounds like a bunch of baloney to me. Like kids playing dress-up. And where has she been for the last few months? I don't even remember seeing her or her family after Reclamation Day. Wasn't she also the one that punched poor Bobby Stoller?
You're asking great questions, but I'm not the person to be answering them. I'm responsible for the safety of our settlement, and regardless of my personal feelings or opinions, we can't be making decisions without information. We've been on our own since we left the vault, but maybe there are others out there, maybe even government folks who can help us. And I know, paint me skeptical too, but I do know that Valeria's parents were some kind of military types. And that's as far as I ever got, because their files were black box. Not even the overseer had access.
Janet was still unmoved. She scowled and flopped down in her chair, mumbling under her breath.
Well, Jason, you've been awfully quiet.
Oh, sorry. I was just considering our options. I mean, it sounds like she could have demanded to be let in, or worse, forced her way in, but instead she asked. To me, that at least deserves a hearing, yeah?
Edwards breathed a sigh of relief. Although not unanimous, at least there were no flat-out no's.
Okay, folks. We'll hear Valeria out. Please, take your seats and I'll be right back.
Outside, Valeria couldn't hear the details of the conversations, but she suspected she knew what was being said. She smiled to herself after checking her Pip-Boy. If a demonstration was required, Modus would be happy to comply.
We're ready to see you now.
Valeria got up and followed Edwards into the conference room. She knew each of the faces around the table, although it seemed like a lifetime ago the last time she saw them in the vault.
Would you like a seat, Valeria?
No, thank you, Captain. I prefer to stand. And I wanted to thank you all for accepting my invitation to talk.
Just who do you think you are? Do you think some fancy armor and weapons makes you important? We've been building something here, and don't think for a minute that we're going to let you barge in and take that away from us.
Now, Janet.
No, it's perfectly fine. I understand that some, maybe even all of you, have significant reservations about my coming here. I mean, it's true that you would consider me a child, perhaps immature, and you don't know my intentions. So please, give me the opportunity to explain.
Janet, though still obviously angry, stayed quiet.
First, I am here representing the Enclave. In the aftermath of the war 25 years ago, portions of the federal government took refuge in a facility adjacent to the White Springs Resort. Due to circumstances which occurred in the intervening years, that remnant died out, along with the rest of the inhabitants of Appalachia. The facility remained intact, however, run by a very powerful artificial intelligence, dedicated to the restoration of proper authority and rebuilding the region. It was this AI that I met a few weeks after leaving Vault 76, and in the time since, we have recruited a number of like-minded Vault residents, and have restarted those operations. And you may ask, where have we been? Why didn't we seek you out sooner? Well, it turns out that there are other threats that required our attention. You've seen the Scorched, and you're probably aware of the Scorched Plague. But there are even larger threats, like scorch beasts that rule the sky. Not to mention super mutants, ghouls, and a host of other foul creatures threatening us all.
Valeria reached into her pack and pulled out several folders.
And I don't expect you to just take my word for it. So, I brought these.
She proceeded to lay each folder on the table, opening them and handing out reports, and more importantly, photographs. Edwards looked through them first, swallowing bile before passing them along to the others. He could see the looks of horror on their faces as they looked through each of the photographs, one after the other, of terrifying creatures, which all looked like they had risen from the very bowels of hell itself. Melissa looked visibly sick, while Janet was white as a ghost. Only Jason appeared to be unaffected, but Edwards knew it was just his analytical mind processing the information. He looked back at Valeria, who stood there stone-faced, watching their reactions.
I fought these creatures, up close and personal, and sacrificed to help defeat them. You are in a world now infinitely more dangerous than you have realized. And we need to work together if we are to survive and rebuild.
Edwards looked down at the photographs, and then back up to Valeria.
What do you want?
The Enclave wants to build a relationship with your settlement. We can provide a degree of protection and resources, and we only ask for your assistance in return.
How can we assist this Enclave? We have rudimentary weapons, small stocks of ammunition, and just about enough food for us alone, and none of us, with the exception of Edwards and his small team, have much in the way of combat experience.
And we've also lost people. We're still trying to find some of our former residents, including a young girl named Sally.
Edwards missed it, but Valeria slightly flinched when the name Sally was mentioned. Unfortunately, she knew exactly what happened to the girl.
And don't think you can bully us either. As Jason said, we don't have much, but it's ours.
Valeria shifted on her feet and put her hands on the table, leaning in.
I completely understand, and I'm not here to make unreasonable demands. In fact, I've yet to ask for anything. But what we do require is access to some of the very smart people you have here, and some other resources in the area. Vault 76 contained the best and the brightest that America had to offer, and your success here is testament to that. Your government is now asking for your help, just as they helped us all in Vault 76 survive in the first place.
It was an appeal to plain old patriotism, a very powerful one too, given all the propaganda used during their time underground in the vault.
Damn, she's good. Makes sense, though. I don't mind being in charge here, but I want to make sure we're doing it for a reason, with a purpose. Hell, an old army guy like me appreciates a chain of command, too. I know I've screwed up in the past, sending Bobby out to the high school alone and letting Reynolds and his gang take Sally to Flatwoods.
And how do you plan to protect us? It doesn't sound like you have too many people, and we don't need empty promises.
That's a very legitimate point. We are rebuilding ourselves, and as I mentioned, we are also fighting against very real threats at the moment. But we can offer combat-ready bots to be based here, under your command, to help protect your settlement. Also, if you allow my teams to use your settlement as a base of operations, they will also act as additional protection in times of need. All I ask is your permission, along with also being able to recruit among your people.
Recruit? You mean conscript, don't you?
That's enough, Janet. If you can't ask civilized questions, I'll ask you to leave.
No, Captain. It was perhaps a poor choice of words. Our intent is only to offer the opportunity, should any of your people wish to participate more directly with us. Also, we can offer more advanced medical and scientific facilities. If you require their use, we can arrange it. And finally, we can begin to set up trade links and maybe even a caravan between us, as part of the rebuilding effort.
Who is it?
It's Cindy. I thought you wanted those questions.
Edwards got up from his chair and went to open the door.
Okay, Cindy. Thanks for doing that. You can give those questions to me.
Cindy handed the ream of paper to the captain. She looked over at Valeria with a bit of awe. Valeria was several years older than her, but they had a few classes together in the vault, and Bobby Stoller had tried to put the moves on her as well, and she remembered having to stifle a laugh when she saw Valeria punch him that night at the party. And now she started to see an opportunity to finally get out of the humdrum of boring settlement life. She'd been listening at the door for a few minutes before she knocked, and when she heard the word recruitment, she got all excited. Cindy blushed when she realized she'd been caught staring.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me know if you need anything else, Captain.
Turning around, she nearly toppled over the chair before finding her way out of the room. Edwards and the others were hardly embarrassed, but Valeria just chuckled and filed away another little bit of information for later.
Well, let's review these questions, shall we?
Edwards handed them around to the others. There were a lot of questions about other members of Vault 76, regions of Appalachia, including a lot of people asking about their former homes in the region. There were even a couple asking about the Overseer. They spent the next hour taking turns asking each question. Some of them Valeria could answer, but most of them she just didn't know. They were happy to hear about other Vault 76 residents who were working with the Enclave, just knowing that they were alive. But not knowing what happened to the Overseer was troubling as well. She had been a mother figure to just about everyone in the Vault, and losing her had been a real blow. Of course, Valeria wanted to find the Overseer for her own reasons. Deep down, she blamed her for what happened to her parents. She would have been more than willing to spend some quality time with her, or better yet, let Lilith do it.
I appreciate the time you've given me today, but I have one more demonstration which might be the final piece needed to convince you. Would you join me on the roof? I have something to show you.
Both Edwards and Jason nodded, and although Melissa and Janet weren't entirely convinced, they didn't see the harm in taking a walk either. They all left the terminal building and ascended the outside fire escape to the roof. Valeria opened up her Pip-Boy and confirmed the coordinates.
Through our reconnaissance, we are aware of a group of super mutants which have taken up residence nearby. Now, you haven't had to deal with them yet, but I can assure you that they are extremely dangerous and would not hesitate to attack you. So, let me show you how the Enclave deals with problems like that. Modus, please activate Operation Firelight.
The assembled group just looked at her, trying to figure out what she meant. Valeria pointed to a nearby hill overlooking the area, topped with an old ranger station.
Just keep your eyes on that spot.
Within a few seconds, it was over, and the assembled group took their hands from their eyes. Where once a ranger station had stood, there was nothing but a long column of black smoke.
What the holy hell was that?
That is our Angel on High, or as it is officially known, the Kovac Muldoon satellite. It's another tool that the Enclave has access to, and has been instrumental in helping deal with some pretty big problems over the past few months. It isn't something we can use all the time, but, as you can see, it works.
Well, count me convinced. No way, no how could I say no to something like that. Especially if it's on our side.
He looked down, and the assembled crowd were gazing at the display in awe. Even the kids, normally running around like mad people, were transfixed.
A little help?
Edwards looked over and saw Jason cradling Janet in his arms.
Crap. She okay?
Just fainted, I think.
Melissa didn't look much better. She held her hand to her head and started swooning. Edward lunged to try to get to her, but Valeria got there first, catching her right before she hit the ground. Valeria laid her gently on the roof and looked over at Edwards.
I'm sorry, Captain.
Certain things are not for the faint of heart, but I believe I speak for all of us when I say that it was much appreciated. I bet both Janet and Melissa will say the same thing when they wake up. It's been quite the day. Would you, care to join us for a drink?
The next few hours were spent fraternizing with the settlers. When Melissa and Janet finally woke up, they apologized for their previous attitudes. Valeria was allowed to invite the rest of her team in as well, and there were even a few heartfelt reunions as former Vault residents got reacquainted with each other. Sergeant Muller was certainly the center of attention. The kids wouldn't leave his power arm alone, and he made quite the spectacle, carrying around the whole class on his shoulders. Valeria put on a happy face as well, although she quickly tired of the revelry and took Edwards aside to discuss the specifics of what she'd need and what they could provide to her.
As always, Captain, the devil is in the details.
Of course. I'd expect nothing less, but tell me, what exactly do you need?
She took out a folded piece of paper from her pack.
This is a list of items and access we need from you. Very little would actually come from here, but There are several wrecked vertibots and pieces of equipment we'd like to salvage for back at White Springs. In return, we'll provide additional water purifiers and even a fusion generator for your use.
Edwards looked over the list. A few of the items he couldn't even place, but the rest appeared to be innocuous and not currently in use anyway.
That seems like a fair deal. How will we stay in contact?
Valeria handed him a small note card.
This is a general frequency that we use for non-military matters. You'll be able to call us and request assistance. When the bots are ready, I'll send them over with a team to include the access codes. You'll be able to assign them to defend this location or perform basic tasks within 1 mile of their access point.
And when we need other things?
We don't have unlimited resources, but we'll do what we can when we can. And sometimes I'll have to say no.
I understand, but I had to ask.
After finishing their conversation, Valeria took a quick walk around the settlement one last time. It didn't take a trained operative to know she was being followed. She'd seen Cindy out of the corner of her eye, trying to look disinterested, but tagging along behind her. Smiling, she decided to play a little game.
Hello, this is Charlie Transmutation coming to you with another PSA announcement.
No, Charlie. This is a commercial.
What? Crap. Nobody told me that. Well, what are you supposed to do in this thing anyway?
Well, Charlie, I'm glad you asked. This is the part where we introduce our new homebrew 5e D&D podcast, The Fumbling Four and the Almighty Crit, where we explore the homebrew world of Alteris using homebrew rules and homebrew material from the Dungeon Masters Guild.
Sounds boring. I'm out of here.
See you later, Charlie. We hope to have you guys come check us out soon. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Valeria walked just a half step faster and turned a corner around one of the cargo boxes. Cindy, seeing her speed up, jogged behind and turned the corner as well, only to find empty space. She looked around, trying to figure out where Valeria went.
Looking for something? Or perhaps someone.
Well...
You're Cindy, right? You were a few years behind me in the vault, weren't you?
Yeah, I was. I didn't think you'd remember me.
Of course I remember you. I seem to remember you being quite the science whiz. And great at gymnastics, too.
You really thought so?
Certainly. But what can I do for you? We need to be leaving soon to get back to our camp before dark.
Take me with you.
What?
Seriously, I heard you were recruiting. I want to join.
What about your parents? What about the settlement?
My parents died a couple months ago, and the captain keeps me stuck here for my own protection, he says. He really got strict after Sally never came back from Flatwoods, and Bobby Stoller got all chewed up a while back.
Cindy, I appreciate the enthusiasm, but you can't imagine what it's like out there. Better you stay here. Looks like they still need every set of hands they can get. Maybe in a year or two.
No. Don't you dare treat me like a child! That's exactly what the captain does. I've been to Morgantown and other places plenty of times without him finding out. I've gotten really good at exploring out there, and I've killed some of the Scorched myself.
Valeria was smiling on the inside, because this certainly wasn't the mousy little Cindy she remembered from the vault. But on the outside, she stood stone-faced.
I can't just take you with us. And if I asked Edwards, I can guarantee he'd say no.
Valeria wondered if Cindy understood what she was saying, and what she wasn't saying.
No. I need to get out of here. My parents wanted me to see the world. They wanted me to do big things. I can't do that here. Don't leave me here, please.
I just can't. I'm sorry.
She turned and walked back to the small party, whistling for her team to fall in.
Ugh. This is totally unfair. I am not taking no for an answer.
The new Enclave team said their goodbyes to the settlers, exchanging small gifts and keepsakes, letting them know that they would be coming back, and also letting them know that things would start to change.
Sergeant, We'll need to keep an eye on some of the folks here. I'm not sure they completely bought into the program. I wouldn't want Lilith to have to pay a visit.
I'll make a note for Modus to ensure the bots we send are equipped with the right type of surveillance devices. And, I saw a grave back there. Said Bobby stole her. That's not...
Yes, Sergeant. And keep it to yourself.
Captain Edwards walked over, extending his hand.
Valeria, I wanted to thank you. You've come a long way since Vault 76. I'm sure your parents would be proud.
Our pleasure, Captain. Here's to new beginnings.
The team left Morgantown Airport before dusk. They had a camp set up a couple of hours down the road and wanted to get back there before it got too dark. The colonel had already reported back to Modus on their success. He had been pleased and was already constructing the bot troop he'd send over, as promised. About an hour into their hike back, Sergeant Muller jogged back over to the colonel.
Ma'am, we have a tail.
Let me guess. Young girl?
Yes, ma'am. And she's not that bad. Only caught her a couple times in view. She's armed. Looked to be a hunting rifle.
Okay. Let's see how she handles herself. Is that pack of ghouls still around Arctos Pharma?
Yes, ma'am. About a dozen last time we checked.
Perfect. Change of route. Let's give our party crasher a proper invitation.
The team worked their way up a nearby hill towards the old Arctos Pharma building. The colonel had led a team to clear it early on, but like many places in Appalachia, it didn't stay clear for long. Modus also believed that there was something going on underneath the building, but they hadn't the resources for a thorough examination.
Something to consider for the future.
They skirted the side of the building, but left plenty of tracks to make it look like they'd entered it. After a few minutes, they set up on the far side to see what would happen next. About 10 minutes later, the colonel spied their tail creeping up the hill. It was Cindy, just as she suspected.
Not so naive after all.
Cindy was wearing a mismatch of old armor, a hood, and was carrying a long-barreled hunting rifle. She moved well in the underbrush, heading directly towards the building, following their track.
You sure this is a good idea, Colonel? She's just a kid.
Well, she said she wanted to join. I wanted to see what she'd do when I said no. And we have to make sure she can hold her own. The Enclave isn't a charity.
From where they lay, they could start to hear the moans of the ghouls. It sounded like several of them had woken up. A few seconds later, they heard the report of a 308. The firing was steady. 4, 5, 6 shots. Then they saw Cindy make a break for the parking lot. Her gun had jammed at the worst possible time, and through her binoculars, the colonel could see a bit of panic in her eyes. The sergeant started to rise.
Get down, Sergeant.
But...
No. Improvise, adapt, overcome. If she can't, she's no use to us.
A couple of the ghouls charged out of the building after her. One of them broke into a full run, knocking Cindy to the ground. She was able to use the busted 308 to push it off of her, but as a result, the stock broke in half, rendering it completely useless. Quickly scrambling backwards, she made the other ghoul miss her by a hair, but both of them were getting back on their feet. Cindy had backed into a construction trailer. She picked up the first weapon she could find and faced off against the two creatures with an old sledgehammer. The first ghoul charged again, and with a massive sweep of the hammer, she caught it in the ribcage, shattering its torso. The second tackled her to the ground, tearing at her armor, before slicing into her side, spraying blood across the pavement. Using the sledge to pin the ghoul away from her, she clutched at her side, then raised the weapon over her head and brought it down on the creature, cracking its skull wide open. Weakening as the blood spilled from her wound, she dropped the sledgehammer and then dropped to her knees. Looking up, she saw Colonel Valeria and her team advancing across the parking lot, just as she passed out and fell over. Sergeant Muller ran over and applied a stim pack to the young girl's side.
Damn it, Colonel, that was too close.
I thought she handled herself rather well, actually. Let's get her patched up. Morgan, Tyler, go clear out the rest of the building. No need to drag Cindy here all the way back to camp in her condition. We can hole up here tonight.
Later that night, Cindy woke up next to a small fire. She was a bit dizzy and sore, and it took a minute for her eyes to adjust and figure out where she was.
Colonel, she's awake.
Good. Go check on Jones. Just about time to relieve him.
Cindy felt her side. It was covered in bandages, but otherwise, it appeared that everything was where it needed to be.
What were you thinking? I told you you couldn't join.
No, you didn't. You said you couldn't take me with you. You didn't. I came of my own free will.
Well, that is true. And you handled yourself pretty well back there. Where did you learn to swing a hammer like that?
Captain Edwards had us break up some concrete a few weeks ago. One of the boys was picking on me, so I showed him what I could do with a sledgehammer.
You did what?
It was only his toe. It was fine. I just said I made a mistake. He stopped picking on me after that.
Oh, I bet he did. And I wager the captain is gonna be looking for you. Guess I'll have to come up with some sort of excuse. Of course, if you had managed to get yourself killed. But you didn't.
You're gonna let me stay?
I didn't say that, now did I?
What?
But I didn't not say it either. Here's the deal. I can't just wave my hand and get you in. You'll need to pass our tests. I have a feeling you will, but if you don't, I'll escort you back to Morgantown myself, and you'll promise to be a good little girl.
Just the thought of it made Cindy's blood boil.
And I'm going to level with you. What you think you've already seen is nothing compared to what else is out there. The Enclave needs soldiers, not charity cases. If you can't cut it, you will die out there. Probably an exceedingly excruciating death. And the things that you'll be told to do, some will be very unpleasant. Orders are orders. I expect results, not questions. Questions get my people killed.
Cindy nodded.
So, last chance to bail out. We can finish patching you up, and I can send you home. Or, you come with us. What's it gonna be?
Cindy slowly raised herself to a sitting position, ignoring the pain in her side. She extended the hand to the colonel, who took it.
Welcome to the Enclave, Cindy. God bless America.
Long gone are the days where people sing about West Virginia as almost heaven. After nuclear war and disease, it's far from heaven now. Far from Heaven, a Fallout 76 story podcast, is a tale of survival, conflict, and hope set in the Fallout 76 game world. Join our survivors on their journey to reach that almost heaven once more. Available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, and many other great podcasting apps. Far from Heaven, a Fallout 76 story, available now.
The Colonel's brand of diplomacy has brought the largest settlement in Appalachia closer to the orbit of the new Enclave. It is but a single step in securing the region, but a very important one. However, the monsters are still out there, and it's only a matter of time before the Enclave will have to deal with them head on. Thank you again, members, for joining us here on the Modus Files. If you've enjoyed this content, please subscribe, and better yet, please leave a review to help others find our little Enclave. You can also follow us on Twitter, @ModusFiles, for more information about our podcast, Fallout 76 content, and random musings on the Enclave. I'd also like to thank our growing cast, Mandy Marie B. as Lieutenant Colonel Valeria, Vitriol Plays as Janet McNally, Don McCormick as Melissa Tennyson, AJ as Kennedy, Rob Cunningham as Jason Barron, Maria Cheshire as Cindy, Austin Rogers as Tom Gunther, and Brad Williams as the voice of Modus, Captain Edwards, and Sergeant Muller. We'd also like to thank the Mr. Jones Show for providing our podcast cover art. You can find him on Twitter @BlankenMedia. And a shout out to the Apocalyptic Aristocracy Discord, home to a great group of fellow creators, the Robots Radio podcast community, and the rest of the Robots Radio Rocket Club, and Jeremiah Johnson, our favorite character artist, who provided the wonderful character artwork you can find on our website. Lastly, thank you to all of our subscribers and supporters. God bless the Enclave, and God bless America.
Members, we look forward to your next visit to our Little Enclave.